I think everybody will get it.
No titles there.
Okay. Okay, did we finish Ois Base? I'm not sure, but we were talking about the difference between the avodah of Karbonis and Keteris. Karbonis is the avodah mitzad Chitzonius Alev, and Keteris are the avodah mitzad Panimius Alev. For that reason, the korban is brought on the Mizbeach HaChitzon, on the outer altar, whereas Keteris is brought on the inner altar. We did talk about the Indian of Reach, that I remember. The Rebbe mentions two differences between the Chitzonius Alev and Panimius Alev, and those two differences are, anybody remember? Because we did see this.
It's changeable.
Changeable, thank you. That's reason two. What you're saying is absolutely right. The
It had
mitzad
intellect.
chitzonius alev, so there can be a shinui. Mitzad panimius alev will say there won't be a change. And
Based on intellect.
beautiful. You keep saving me. You keep saving me. The only guy who listens to me. That's not your pleasure. Right. So that the panimius alev, chitzonius alev is al pi tam v'das. Meaning it's love that comes as a result of tam v'das. Makes sense to love God because He's good to me. Right? And there's obviously a deeper connection to the Eibishter. Right? Sorry, Father. Right? So the source of all our being, not simply that He made me, but He and I are one. Right? Okay. So the first level will allow for change, right? Because it might be that I come to a different understanding, or someone convinces me that something about my understanding is lacking, etc. The second is an essential reality. Okay, so we talked about Narus Mechazvim. I think that was the last thing we talked about. And we did talk about the fact that if your Aveda is not constantly in the same place, that does not mean that there's no truth to those good parts of your Aveda. Right? Emes Lamita, okay, maybe not, but Emes, definitely. Right? Meaning, Rasha V'Tovlei can do mitzvahs. Right? Who's a Rasha V'Tovlei? Rosh Hashanah is someone who every now and then might do an Aveira, right? True? Not Tanya? Right? Who's a Beinoni, never does an Aveira. Right? Does he have a Yitzhahara, the Beinoni? Yes, a Yitzhahara. Might he have a subconscious desire to do something that's selfish and not connected to the Eibishter? Yes. Will he? No. He won't think about it, he won't speak about it, he won't do it. Okay. So, but does he have the subconscious desire for it? Yes. Nefesh B'Ami says he Yitzhahara like everybody else. Okay, but he happens to have great control over it. The Rosh Hashanah is someone who might fall prey to it now and then. So he'll be called a Rasha, but he's still Toivloi. There's still a lot of good to him. Chas v'shalom to say that just because he doesn't avail, I mean, in the case of the river, doesn't avail once every 7 years, so then he's not serious. He's just not connected. Mapitom. The guy's an amazing guy. Incredible. Okay. So. But in Emes Lamita, if there's any moment in which I'm not connected to something, so then there's a lack of absolute connection to that. I mean, there's no question. Okay. Hine. Now that I was going to get into this discussion of the Vekas and Iskashrus, and that's really what the Mimer deals with, and it's a whole sugya in Chassidus of 3 different levels of connection to a Kadosh Baruch Hu. One's called the Vekas, Vatem had Vekim Ba'elokechem. One's called Hiskashrus, right? And that's brought in the Zohar. It Katarna B'chad Katira, bound up with one Kesher, right? And then there's His Achdus, and that's what the Rashbi said about himself relative to the last day of his life, Bei Achida. That finally I got to that. Today, Ha'idna, I reached the level of Bei Achida. And the Rebbe then spent the whole rest of the first chapter explaining the first ois, explaining the fact that he must have been on that level, he must have been connected to that on some level throughout his life, but it was brought into a state of revelation, Dafka, on the last day of his life. Okay. All right, so now the Rebbe brings in something a new point called Dveikus. We hadn't seen Dveikus. We'd only seen these Kashus and Chida. Who ba'avodah de milamata lamayla? The chiluk, this difference between the Dveikus and Iskashus is regarding the avodah from below above. Okay, now I'm not going to get into this. Did we see this last time and I told you I wasn't going to get it? I don't remember. Anyway, we're not going to get into this. This is a really, really, really confusing point. And I'll just show you how confusing it is, so I'll read you something that none of us are going to understand, just so we'll have a good time reading something that we don't understand, so we won't feel so smart all the time, right? And I can't explain this to you, right? I tried. I listened to a couple of classes on it, etc., from different, but I mean, they also, when they were explaining it, were saying, look, maybe it's like this, I don't know, I'm not sure. But if you look at footnote 27 with the asterisk, just for fun, right? You should know what's out there, right? Re'eh Sefer Maimarim, now that's Taf Reish Ayin Zayin, okay? That's 1917. It's the year my father was born, right? My kids were all excited when they found out that their grandfather was born when the Rebbe Shab was Rebbe. Re'eh Sefer Maimarim Ezras, right? Avodas HaKarbonos. Now this you're going to recognize because this you've just seen, and this is exactly what we've been saying. Avodas HaKarbonos, the service of Karbonos. Bechinas Chitzonius Alev, right? This is a review of what we just saw. Amnam, Bechinas Panemius Alev, but the inner reality of the heart, Hu Inyan HaKetaros. That's Ketaros. Well, what the Rebbe just taught us is based on this. Shulash Niskashus, that's a language of connection, bonding. V'iskashus hu l'mayla midvekus. And Iskashus is higher than Dveikus. Ukamesha kosu bi'urei hazoyar parshas truma, like it says in the beer of the Zohar in Parshas Truma. Did we discuss that? Well, we did, right? I think so. Anyway, no?
Is it the Chassidus and Zohar?
No. We didn't mention anything about the beer of Zohar, the Mitla Rebbe, and the Tzemach Tzedek. No, we did just because it's so interesting that when the Rebbe said this mimer, the Rebbe is quoting that. Oh, no, I know when we said it. We said when the Rebbe said earlier in the mimer, the Rebbe said, V'yuven zebaknim hayodua, on the his base. And the Rebbe quotes the beer Zohar of the Mitla Rebbe, which wasn't in print. So how are we supposed to know it? But anyway, what are you going to do? You could get, we were talking about it yesterday, Dafki, in Shul, and a friend of mine said he has one. I said, he had one there, he had one 45 years ago. So I said, yeah, okay, you found it in the back of some bookstore and it was an old gray copy, right? I had one of those too, right? But you couldn't find, they weren't being printed. So he said, yeah, it's true. Okay. But Biur Zer Parshas Truma, Aval, Sarach Iyun. The Rebbe says, now the Rebbe's going to add, now this is interesting, this isn't a footnote, it's not part of the mimer. I mean, the Rebbe didn't say it when he was saying the mimer, but he did think this was something that people should be aware of, and so he put it in the footnote. Now the footnote's going to say something very, very difficult, okay, but we'll just see it, because it's just interesting. We just said as follows, and I don't understand exactly, well, we could explain it generally. And what was that? That was the first line in Ois Gimmel that said, Chiluk zeh bein deveikus v'iskashus hu ba'avodah de milamata lamayla. Okay, now that's going to be explained further in the mimer, basically the difference between mitzvahs and Torah. Okay? That's going to be milamata lamayla, from below above, our avodah from below above, and there's two different levels of our avodah, Torah and mitzvahs. Mitzvahs are deveikus because there's two separate things. Right? Meaning there's you and your tefillin, you're not one. Torah is iskashus. Torah is mamish, united with you, it gets into you, it becomes part of your conscious reality. It's not something you put on, it's something you put in, literally. Like the Pasach says, Terasva b'seich me'ai, your Torah is within my loins, meaning we eat it, so to speak. It's like food as opposed to clothing. A mitzvah is a lavush, a garment. Torah is like machal, food. Okay, so you become one with your food. So that's going to be the iskashus with Torah as opposed to the deveikus of mitzvahs. Okay, that's the line we saw here. But now, just for fun, look and see what the Rebbe says. About tzarech, but this requires explanation. It's not so clear. Mihemshech taf reish ayin beis. It says taf ayin reish beis because the word reish ayin beis is ra'av, which is a famine. So often when it's printed taf ayin reish beis. So taf reish ayin beis is 1922. Is that right? Yeah. No, so I'm sorry, 1912. 1912. That which it says in the Zohar, in the Biur Zohar, Parshas Truma, the same book that we quoted above. She's kashrus hu yosem devekus, that his kashrus is greater than devekus, which is what our mimer is going to talk about. But the Rebbe decided to put this footnote in here. Yesh lemer shesha, the sham over there when they say that when his kashrus is greater than devekus, medubar b'devekus shemitzad ha'elyon. That's talking about devekus from the vantage point of above. Now, when we read the following line, you can understand why I don't understand this at all. Aval milamata lamayla, but from below above. Now, look at the first line in our paragraph. What did it say? This difference between devekus and hiskashrus, such that hiskashrus is the higher level and devekus is the lower level. That's what we've been talking about. Hu ba'avoda de milamata lamayla. That's from below above. Okay. So now the Rebbe says that which we said that hiskashrus is higher than devekus. That's from the vantage point of above. Avav milamata lamayla, but from below above, which is what we just said at the top of the page, that's where hiskashrus is greater than devekus. Devekus uba bechinas is achdus yesem hiskashrus. Devekus is a greater connection of oneness than hiskashrus. Okay, so I don't understand that. And I'm not going to pretend to explain it. But, why did we read it if it's something I don't understand and something that you're not going to understand, and why waste our time? So first of all, you should know that this whole discussion that we're having now is a whole sugya in Chassidus between different levels of connection to a Kadosh Baruch Hu, and which affords a more powerful connection to a Kadosh Baruch Hu. And the question regarding mitzvahs and Torah is a real question. Meaning, simply, we'll say that Torah allows us a greater connection to a Kadosh Baruch Hu, a greater unity with the Kadosh Baruch Hu than mitzvahs. And where will you see that expressed absolutely clearly in the most simple, so to speak, way? And you all know. That's why I'm asking. What's the book everybody's supposed to know? Everybody reads every day.
Tanya?
Tanya. There's a book called Tanya, right? And it's supposed to be easy and we all understand it. I would never teach Tanya. You have to know everything to teach Tanya. It's like teaching Torah B'chsav without Rashi. Okay. They say that the Gaon of Vilna at the end of his life used to just read Psukim. And he'd remember all of the Torah Shabbal Peh on that Pasach, and so that's how he'd learn Torah Shabbal Peh. He wouldn't learn Torah Shabbal Peh, just learn a Pasach, and he'd remember every Gemara and every Drush and everything that was said on that Pasach. Okay, if you know everything, so you can do that. Well, Tanya's very hard. It's really a hard book. Okay, but there's parts of Tanya that are explainable. Very explainable. Right, and what's that? Chapter 4 and chapter 5. What does chapter 4 talk about? Mitzvahs. And what does chapter 5 talk about? Torah. And what does it talk about? The advantage of Torah over mitzvahs. That's what it talks about. And it talks about it in the context of unity, of the unity you and I experience with God by virtue of doing a mitzvah, as opposed to the unity that you and I experience with God through learning Torah. And the unity that you and I experience with God through learning Torah is much greater, the Rebbe explains. Why? Because basically God's intellect and your intellect become one. Where does God's thought end and yours begin when you're thinking about an idea that's in the Torah? Right? Ruvain toyen kach, v'Shimon toyen kach, v'Pasach b'neihem kach v'kach. Okay? Now, I know, and I'm saying the word relatively because everybody in this room is different. Everybody's an individual, and everybody has a different story. That being said, every single person in this room should know the first 5 prakim of Tanya Baal Peh. Not Baal Peh, word for word. Just know exactly what's talked about in the first chapter, exactly what's talked about in the second chapter. Really, you should do the first 12. Okay, Beseder, I'm being nice. Right? Because chapter 6 starts talking about the Nefesh HaBahamis, and maybe, it's a downer, man. I don't want to talk about the Nefesh HaBahamis. But the Nefesh Elokis, you want a map of the Nefesh Elokis, chapter 3, chapter 4, chapter 5. And just those 3 chapters, again, the whole book obviously you have to know, but those 3 chapters have to be something just so clear that and they're not hard. It really isn't hard information. Relative to other things you've learned, you'll find it relatively easy to read it and understand it. And if you don't understand it, Beseder, go on Inside Chassidus and have Yossi Paltiel explain it to you in nice English. He'll tell a couple of jokes. Probably not too many in Tanya. Hey, so in the 4th and 5th chapter in Tanya, the Rebbe explains the difference between mitzvahs and Torah. And that's really what we're seeing here. So, despite footnote 27 with the asterisk, okay? But there really is, it's very interesting, there's a number of Maimarim where the Rebbeim discuss the difference between all these different levels of our connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and how you achieve this and how you achieve, and not how you achieve this in some crazy spiritual way, simply. I don't mean crazy, you know what I mean, like, transcending Olam Hazeh. No. Things that you and I do every day. A mitzvah is an expression of Devekus. Learning Torah is an expression of Hiskashrus, simply. Even though the Rebbe's going to explain these Hiskashrus if we get there.
And orthogonal question, are there people out there who understand this, or is this like an active debate between Mashpim about what this really means? It's sort of more of an open question.
No, it's an active debate between the Rebbeim and Maimarim.
Oh, well.
That's what I mean. When you say a sugi in Chassidus, you mean the Rebbeim discussed this. Well, here the Rebbe just said there seems to be a machlekes in 2 places in the Rebbe Rashab about this topic. But Sarchian means we have to look into this. So the Rebbeim did. Conclusions? Again, I listened to Asher Farkas. You know what, I'll even say, try to explain this footnote. Because he said, I find this very hard to understand. Looking at Ayin Base, this is what I get the sense of what it is that the Rebbe is trying to say over here. So I don't feel bad not understanding it if Asher Farkas says that. Because, usually if I want to understand something, that's who I'll listen to. The man's amazing. But there's things that exist, they're just hard. Yeah. It's hard, right? The Rebbe Rashab is explaining some idea and some levels of godliness. Okay, so he's the Rebbe Rashab, and you're trying to figure it out down here with human intellect. He wrote it down in an unbelievably clear way, but still, it's just very, very hard. It's just hard. Okay, so this whole sugya, really, it's a very difficult sugya. Okay, Beseder, but there's still basics that we can learn, and that's exactly what the Rebbe tells us here. And in all fairness, the Rebbe edited this and thought that this was something relevant to us. It's also interesting that the Rebbe put in his footnote, right? Here, chew on this. But okay, but the basic mimer is something we can understand. The karbonis uketera shneim heim amud aveda. They're like a pillar of aveda. Second line in gimmel. Shehi halo milamata lamayla, which is elevating from below above. Our basic Aveda is we are down here and we are trying to elevate that which is down here up to its source in godliness. Most of what we do is that. Right? Now, that means we have to have some connection to down here. That means there has to be a Ritzoi V'Shev. There has to be certain moments of religious transcendence. Okay, Beseder, but ultimately we have to come back here and realize that most of our Aveda is down here in Olam Hazeh. Right? Dealing with physical reality and dealing with other people, etc., etc. And that's our avodah. Right? V'achiluk bein, in that context, v'achiluk bein devekus v'iskashus be'inyan hamshocha milamayla lamata, right? So now you and I are mostly milamata lamayla. Now obviously Kadosh Baruch Hu is milamayla lamata. That Kadosh Baruch Hu is, so to speak, above, and all of his goodness and shefa and bounty descends down, including Torah, right? But also just including everything that we have. So what's the difference between these two different levels, be'inyan hamshacha, relative to the levels of godliness that are drawn down milamayla lamata? Torah and Gemilas Chasadim, right? Because there are two levels of avodah that you and I do that are somewhat connection to the idea of drawing godliness down into the world. Generally, simply, this is what the Rebbe is hinting at here. Simply, you and I would say as follows: mitzvahs is all milamata l'mayla. I'm taking physical reality and I'm elevating it to a higher state. Taking a green stick and a lemon, and it's all of a sudden becoming something godly. Okay, taking a pair of, skin of a cow and turning it into something of unbelievable holiness called tefillin, or a sefer Torah, or whatever it happens to be. Taking something below and elevating it above. But there are also aspects of our Aveda that are shaykh to a drawing down from above below, meaning drawing into the world a revelation of godly reality. We also do that, right? Now, it's interesting because usually when we talk about on mitzvahs aseh, we'll talk about being mamshich elokus into the world. Okay, there's no question we are drawing godliness down into the world. That's true. But we're also, the ikr of what we're doing is elevating the physical reality to a higher place, because on Har Sinai, what happened? We went up and God came down. So now, what's the expression of drawing down from above below? How is that expressed most powerfully? Torah. Right? Give me this chesed also. Why? Because of what God does. God's whole being is Kamilas Chesed. Everything God does is Chesed, right? Of course, there's din and all the other, but the Eibishter is giving and giving and giving constantly to you and I.
Not davening.
Davening is the ultimate in below above. Here we are down here with no props, trying to figure out how to go up and connect to something beyond us, and as opposed to being given a prop. Relative to davening, so mitzvahs are milamayla lamata, from above below. Why? Because the Eibishter gave me the lulav. He said, here, I'm going to turn this green stick and this lemon into something holy. Now you just take it and shake it and you're done. Davening, I'm not going to do anything. Just figure out how to get your consciousness to want to praise me and express its love for me. No props. Now, you and I might have a prop. Might put on tefillin, might put on a talis, sort of wrap ourselves in the talis and wrap ourselves in the tefillin and feel a little more connected as a result of that. Okay, Seder, but still, bottom line, we have to daven. And mincha and maariv certainly have to daven, and women have to do the same in Shabbos. Right? Very hard. Right? So davening is the ultimate. But mitzvahs obviously come from above below. The kedusha of the mitzvah is the fact that the Eibishter gave that act holiness, and the act has no holiness unto itself. There's no holiness in shaking a green stick and a lemon. As a matter of fact, if you were to take a lulav and esrog right now with hadassim and a raves, and they're the most kosher lulav, esrog, hadassim, and raves that have ever existed in the physical world, and you were to shake them now with a very serious look on your face, you would probably be able to being mevatel the mitzvahs aseh of learning Torah. Just be bittul Torah. Absolute waste of time. Right? You might as well read the news. Right? This is irrelevant. Right? Why? Well, because if you don't do that between the 15th and 21st of, or 22nd or 21st of Tishrei, so it's irrelevant. It's a completely irrelevant act. Right? Okay. So there is an from above below in mitzvahs that's very powerful. On the other hand, the basic avodah mitzvahs is you and I are down here trying to connect to him up there. Okay, so we do mitzvahs. Learning Torah too. Now, our learning Torah is also that to the extent that we're trying to connect our human consciousness to him up there. That's for sure. But it's also true that Torah is a revelation of godly wisdom down here in Eilam Hazeh. Right? So Torah has more of a lamaila lamata element than mitzvahs because it's not physical. Even though it talks about physical things, but it itself isn't. Mitzvahs are pashut physical. So let's see what the Rebbe says. Hamshachim ilamaila lamata Torah gemilas chasam hu kedisa b'zayar. It's the Rashbi, right? Kama chavivin Yisrael kame kuchabich. How dear are the Yidden in front of the Eibush. Uboili is davka bohu ulis kashra imahoin. Both words, there they are. And they want, or he wants to be dovik in them, meaning Kadosh Baruch Hu wants to be connected to us, ulis kashra imahoin, and to be bound up with us. Oh, so how does this happen? Umavarad Maram Soy, and the Mittler Rebbe explains in Biur Zohar that we're supposed to know the lis davka buhu. How does the Eibishter, so to speak, cling to us? Well, you're there mitzvahs. He gives us mitzvahs. Dam shochal yedei mitzvahs hi bechinas makif. The drawing down of godliness that comes through the agency of a mitzvah is a makif. It's something that surrounds us. It's not something we become one with. It's not something that we internalize. Because where does the mitzvah happen? Outside of me. Right? I'm putting the tefillin on me. I'm putting the tzitzis on me. Right? Learning Torah, that's not the case of learning Torah. I'm putting the Torah in me. Mamish, literally, it's going in me. It's now becoming part of my conscious reality. God's wisdom, God's will. Right? That's very, very different than a mitzvah. So a mitzvah is a makif. What's a makif? A makif is something that doesn't penetrate into my conscious inner reality. Now that doesn't mean I don't have a relationship with it. It's like a hug. A hug is a makif. It's around me. It's not in me. It's around me. That's why, interesting enough, look at the pasuk that's quoted. Commercial Kosev, like the pasuk says, Shiur. Shalom HaMelech, describing mitzvahs. V'yaminai tichabkeni, his right hand hugs me. Chibuk is a hug. Sha'or shenim shachayidei mitzvahs, that the light that's drawn down through mitzvahs, hu mechabek es ha'adam, hamakayim es ha'mitzvahs. It hugs the person. It encompasses them in a hug. What's the mashal in Tanya? Right? The Alter Rebbe brings. When the king gives you a hug, it doesn't matter whether he's wearing one thin garment or he's wearing 6 ski jackets. If he's hugging you, so the king's in there, or you're hugging him, the king is in there. So there, in that mashal, it's us hugging the king. But in terms of here, we're talking about the Eibishter hugging us. We're talking about the Eibishter connecting to us through mitzvahs. We're also connecting to him. We're giving him a hug. All right, so he's in there. I might not feel him. Why don't I feel him? Well, because I'm dealing with physical reality. I'm dealing with leather straps and leather boxes. I'm dealing with a green stick and a lemon. I'm dealing with a wool garment when 34 degrees outside. All right? Remember, I'm dealing with Kiddush wine, challah. I mean, what are mitzvahs? I mean, so many mitzvahs, maisias, right? A shofar. Matzah. See, matzah vitakid. I brought some matzah. I'm sure there's matzah all over this place. But I brought some matzah because my wife says we have too much matzah, and why don't you take some to the yeshiva? So I come on the bus every day. I'm not going to schlep matzah on the bus and walk with 2 big boxes of matzah. So today, because we're going away and my wife didn't go to work this morning, so then I brought the car. So I put the matzahs in the car. She also had 5 other things that I should have brought, but I said, enough is enough. Books. She says, we have all these books that we bought for bar mitzvahs. You guys got some of those books, right? When you came from Pesach, right? So there's more where those came from, right? So my wife wants me to bring them here. She said, why don't you give them out to your bochum? Every time someone gives a good answer, you give them a book. I said, okay, I'd be out of books like this. Amnon would get them all.
It's true.
That's not true. There's lots of good answers to lots of good, but Amnon Baruch Hashem is the one who remembers things like this better than everybody, and everybody should learn from Amnon. I think that's why, because he's writing it all down over there so religiously. And then after class, he always asks me a question. It's so annoying. So mitzvahs are, so to speak, when relatively external, because they're happening outside of me. So that's a makif. Again, what's a makif? A makif, that doesn't mean a makif is negative. A makif is just something that doesn't penetrate into my pneumius because it's happening outside of me. Okay, so now that means, of course, and you guys have learned this, it might very well be that the shorish of the mitzvah is so powerful that it can't be brought into pneumius, okay? Because a makif is usually a level of godly light that's so powerful it can't be brought into pneumius. Okay, that's a separate issue, right? Not the... Oh, it's a makif, that's negative. It's not negative, that's a reality, right? And there's advantages to that reality and disadvantages to that reality, like everything else. Okay, so what's the, so to speak, disadvantage to that reality? Well, it's shiur to the level of devekus, because it's shiur to the level of clinging, longing, connecting to something that's, so to speak, outside of you. It doesn't become mamish part of you. Why not? The nature of the action. The tefillin's on you. The tzitzis are on you. Okay. The chibuk. We read that line. She'or shenim shecha yidei mitzvahs hu mechabek es ha'adam and mekayim mitzvahs. The chibuk, last line. Hu mi b'chutz, it's outside. V'lo chein eimer lizdavka b'hu. Therefore it says, Lizdavka buhu. That line in the Zohar is talking about mitzvahs. Because the Zohar says, oh, the Eibishter loves the Yidden so much. He wants to be davek with them. He wants to be kashur with them. What's the difference? Chazal don't say things just to be poetic. So there's a difference between the first level and the second level. So the first level, that's mitzvahs. The devekus hu chibur might be the next side of the page. It is. We save trees here. The chibur chitzoni. It's an external connection. And when the Zohar says ulis kashra l'imohin, the Eibishter wants to be bound up with us. Well, yidei Torah. The hamshocha shal derahu b'pnimius. That godliness drawn down through Torah becomes part of it. K'mo shekatzu b'serascha b'seich me'ar. Here, Torah is in my loins. That's the father of the person who said, Yeminei tichabkeni. Shlomo Melech said that. David Melech said this. V'lochein eimer liskashra imahin. One with you. And again, in the fifth parak, this is the fourth and fifth parak of Tanya Mamish, because in the fourth parak, what does it talk about? The connection brought about through mitzvahs. In the fifth parak, it says a yichud nifla she'ein yichud kameya. There's a wondrous unity, the likes of which can't be experienced through anything else, and that's Torah. And again, as we said earlier, when you're sitting and learning a page of Torah, so that's God's will and that's God's wisdom. And you are thinking about it, and you are trying to understand it, and it's now part of your intellectual reality. And so you are thinking about the fact that when Reuven says this and Shimon says this, the halachic reality, the halachic solution to that is such and such. So whose idea is that? It's the Eibishter's idea. The Eibishter said that. So now whose idea is it? Yours. Where does his end and yours begin? One and the same. That's that level of unity brought about through Talmud Torah, which is just absolutely astounding. And it can even be in the context of talking about an ox goring a sheep. It doesn't have to be talking about different levels of godly reality in Chassidus. Nigla. Right? The iskashus chibur panimi. Iskashus is an inner connection. Shachibur the Kadosh Baruch im Yisrael shal yedei Torah, the connection of the Kadosh Baruch Hu with the Jewish people through Torah Nikris Kashrus. Kemaimer, a famous Maimer that you've probably that you've probably all seen and heard in different contexts. Tlas ksharin imun miskashrin da b'da. Three knots are tied this with this. Kuchabrichu, Oraisa, v'Yisrael. The Eibishter, the Torah, and the Jewish people. And again, the notion of his kashrus. Right, look at footnote 36, interesting footnote. Kainhu, that chafez, Kainhu, similarly it is, Kuchabrichu Raisa v'Yisrael, which is what we just read. Seder de milamayla lamata, in the orders from above, below. First the Eibishter, then the Torah, then Yisrael. Even on a certain level, Yisrael is higher than the Torah, we know that, but not down here. Only in the Shorish. That's how the Zohar says it. The Bekama Mekayim is a Seder Hu, but there are a number of places where the Seder is Yisrael or Isa B'Kuchabrichu. And in Chassidus, you'll usually find that the Rebbeim say Yisrael or Isa B'Kuchabrichu. Am Yisrael, the Torah, and the Eibishter are one. Milamata Lamayla, from below up. It's usually how it's quoted in Chassidus. In the Zohar, it says or Isa Kuchabrichu or Isa Yisrael. Let's go a little further. Vehine. But the Vekis Yisrael b'Kadosh Baruch Hu in this very powerful clinging. The Vekis is a hard word to translate. Devik is glue, right? Okay, so that image. But when you glue two things together, they're two things being glued together. They are not one thing. They are two things being glued together. Right? That's, just the difference between oisius letters written on a cloth. So the cloth and the letter never become one. Right? Matter of fact, have you ever seen a sefer fix something? Now they have these electric pencils. Zzz, zzz, zzz. In the old days, how did they fix a letter that was not so right? They used to scrape it off with a razor blade, because you can scrape it off. And it would flake off, because it's not the cloth, right? It's still ink on the cloth, right? Even though it certainly looks like it's the same, but it isn't. So that's the Vekas. Very powerfully connected, but they're not the same thing, as opposed to the Luchos, oisios carved into the stone and the ois are one and the same thing. You can't take the ois out of the stone. They're one and the same thing. They're carved in. Right? The Chukaisai ultimately want the Torah to be carved in us, not simply written on us, so to speak. It should be part of us. It's impossible to separate the two. It's a beautiful story I heard from Yosef Weinberg. Yosef Weinberg was... he led a fascinating life. He started in Poland, actually. He met the Friedrich. He wasn't in Russia. No, he was in Temche Temimim in Poland, in Ottoman. So he met the Friedrich Rebbe there and was very close to the Friedrich Rebbe and basically spent the war. I don't know how he got out from the war. I have to ask his kids. His son was the shaliach in our hometown. His son is the grandfather of Yossi Shem Tov's wife, right? Esther Shem Tov is really, she's really Esther Shem Tov, but she started out Esther Weinberg. She's still been Esther Weinberg longer than she was Esther Shem Tov. I think she's still relatively young. Okay, so her grandfather was Yitzchak Weinberg, as shaliach in Vancouver. So his father was Yosef Weinberg. So he used to daven Rosh Hashanah, Musaf Rosh Hashanah by the Rebbe. No, it's the first night slichus. You've all seen the videos, first night slichus, right, by the Rebbe. I'm sure this year if you were around it. So he used to daven from the Yom Meitzi Shabbos, right? Meitzi Melukat. he told us stories. He said, well, it was like davening from the Rebbe. So sometimes the Chassidim, especially the Bach, were always interested in making sure that the Rebbe didn't have to wait. So if, it was always hard to daven exactly at the same speed as the Rebbe when you were Shaliach Tzibur, because you never knew exactly. So sometimes he would be davening, and the Rebbe, it was clear the Rebbe, so the Bachrim would go pinch him. So here he's davening not Shemona Esrei, but he's davening from the Amud on Rosh Hashanah, right? And the Bachrim are pinching, come on! They can't say anything. So finally they put up a little barrier so he could be safe over there. Really? Wow. This is way back. This is not like, modern Bachrim with baseball caps. This was like, way, way, way back. This is Bachrim or Bachrim. They always know better. So he told an amazing story. When it's, I don't know, I have to ask his son. I'd really be interested to know. Maybe his granddaughter knows. Probably not. I don't know how he got out of Europe. He was avoiding the Nazis in Warsaw with the Frierdiker Rebbe. There would be bombing and they would have to move where they were and go somewhere. So he was with the Frierdiker Rebbe in Poland. I'll just tell you a great story, because it might not go so much further than mine, but I'll tell you a great story that is a good story. Then it's every Bacher has to hear the story. Rabbi, I think it was Greenglass, it might have been Rabbi Handel. I'm not sure. I know I was getting Montreal. I think it was Rabbi Greenglass. Rabbi Greenglass was a Bacher. He went to Temche Temimim in Otavosky in Poland to be accepted to the yeshiva. He was told that he would have to wait until the next day. He got there one day, he'd have to wait until the next day to have his test. But he didn't have a place to sleep. So he didn't know what to do. So he asked one of the Bachrim. So one of the Bachrim said, well, my roommate probably won't come to his bed tonight. And if he does, it'll be very late, really very early. So why don't you use his bed? And then when he comes, he'll get out of his bed. It's okay. So he lay down. And then at about, 6 in the morning, 6:30 in the morning, all of a sudden the Bacher walked in the room and it woke him up, and he figured this must be the guy whose bed it is. And this Bacher, why was he not in bed? Because he used to work on the Frierdiker Rebbe's Maimarim and Sichos to print them and publish them. So that's what he was doing all night. He was working on getting the Rebbe's Torah printed and published. So he didn't come to sleep that day. So he came up at about 6:30 in the morning, and he said he was ready to get out of bed, but he didn't seem to be getting into bed, this other Bacher. He put his, first, there's a preamble to this story. I heard it from his son, Yitzchak. Yitzchak Weinberg once missed Chassidus in Yeshiva in Montreal. Rabbi Greenglass called him into the office and told him the story. When I was young, okay, fine. Now, he's the one sleeping in the bed, Rabbi Greenglass, as a Bacher. Now he's the Rosh Yeshiva in Montreal, Beseder, Mashpia. But fine. He's telling this story to Yitzchak Weinberg. He says, so I slept in this Bacher's bed. And at about 6:30, the Bacher came up. He put his foot on the windowsill, leaned on his foot, lean like that, right? Leaned on his foot and said Kriya Shema Shalamita for about half an hour, and then went downstairs to mikveh and Chassidus. He never went to his bed. So he said, Rabbi Greenglass said to Yitzi Weinberg, that was your father. Don't you ever miss Chassidus again. Whoa. He said, I never did. I was scared stiff to miss. I didn't know what he was going to do to me. That was his fault. That was Yosef Weinberg. So Yosef Weinberg told the story when he first got to America. He was a Chassid of the Frierdiker Rebbe, right? And Frierdiker Rebbe sent them out to do a fatzah, to go visit Jews in America. And America was just an absolute religious wasteland at that point. Just a disaster. I mean, today, as much as you might say that a lot of Jews in America are rather disconnected from Jewish things, which is certainly true, but America is full of yeshivas and schools and, in the shuls in those days, nothing. In New York, there was something going on, but even then, when the Frierdiker Rebbe got to America, in the religious schools in New York, meaning religious, shibber religious, the most religious schools in New York, they were being taught secular subjects by non-Jewish teachers. Now, that wouldn't fly in the most modern school in America today. Right? But that's what was going on in the schools in Brooklyn. So the Frierdiker Rebbe put a stop to that. I mean, that was America's Nitanders. That's what he was talking about. Okay, so America was a wasteland relative to Yiddishkeit. And the Rebbe sent people out. So Yosef Weinberg was one of them. And they wrote the Rebbe a letter, the Frierdiker Rebbe. They wrote a letter. How amazing it is that you just have a conversation with Jews and they connect to things in such a way you'd never figure they never imagined they would be connected, and yet you see that they're so powerfully connected. And they wrote a mushal. What was their mushal in their letter? They said it's like an ois in the Sefer Torah that has a crack, and all you do is a little bit of ink, and it's a perfectly good letter again. So you see, just a little bit of Torah, and these Jews are connected. Sounds like a beautiful mushal, right? So the Frierdiker Rebbe heard the mushal, he got the letter, scratched out the mushal, wrote them back. So that's not the proper mushal. The proper mushal is a letter carved in stone. He said, according to you, your mushal, a cracked letter in a Sefer Torah is puzzle, and not only is it puzzle, disqualified, but the whole Sefer Torah is puzzle. Not one Jew is puzzle. There's no such thing as a Jew that's puzzle. All it is that they're like letters carved in stone, and they've been filled up with dirt. So you can't see the letter. But then when you move the dirt out of the way, there's this perfect letter that was always perfect. It was never puzzle. It was always a perfect letter. That was the Rebbe. So the Chassid, yeah, you and I would think that first mushal was a beautiful mushal, right? Because we're only Chassidim, trying to be. The Rebbe says, no. A perfect letter. Oisius chakukes, carved. Let's go a little further. So now the Rebbe brings, and we won't see too much of it, but the Rebbe brings a medrash and a zohar that relate to two different aspects of this Dveikus. And we're going to see that it basically is Torah and mitzvahs and Torah. V'hine, but Dveikus Yisrael b'Kadosh Baruch shemitzad zeh yesh lehem. I want to read that slowly because it's such an amazing line. Dveikus Yisrael b'Kadosh Baruch Hu, the connection of the Jewish people to Kadosh Baruch Hu. And the Zohar that we just read was his connection to us. Shemitzad zeh, as a result of this, yesh lehem hakayach lahakriv karbanos. They have the power, the ability to sacrifice sacrifices, meaning to take physical reality and elevate it to a state of holiness. What gives us the kayach to do that? Our connection to the Eibishter. It's not self-understood. Shnei inyanim. There's two aspects of it. To be medrash, in the medrash, Isa, the zeh shekadosh baruch hu tzivos Yisrael, is nigla. Right? That which HaKadosh Baruch Hu commanded the Jewish people, Lakriv Karbonos, Hu mipnei shen devukim li. Right? That's because they are connected to me. Right? Devukim, however we're translating devukim, hard word to translate. But glue. Hahu dechsiv, that's what is written. Ki kasher yidba ka'ezer el masnei ish, like the belt is connected to the torso of the person. So that's nigla. That's the medrash. But Zohar, he said, what's the Zohar saying? Pnimius Torah. Zakayin inun Yisrael. They're meritorious, the Jewish people. Inun is they. The kuchabrichu karaloin Adam. Kadosh Baruch Hu calls them Adam. Adam ki yakriv. The pasuk in the beginning of Vayikra, which is the beginning of the whole halachic discussion of karbanos, of sacrifices. Adam ki yakriv, a person ki yakriv. Meaning, a person, an Adam, someone who's on the level of Adam, that's the person who can bring a korban. My time at Karan learn Adam. Why does the Rebbe call them Adam? Because you are so powerfully connected to a Kadosh Baruch Hu. So you're called Adam, therefore you also have the ability to be Makriv Karbonos. K'mavur b'hemshech tafresh samavav. The B'medrash medaber binyan devekus de kelim. Let's explain this very, very quickly. In the Medrash, it's talking about one level of devekus. That's the devekus on the level of kelim. What are kelim? Kelim are that which allow for the apparent separate existence of something other than a Kadosh Baruch Hu. Kelim are that which allow for what you and I call Metzias, the existence of something created. Right? Now, the true shurish of those kelim is also Elokus. Okay, say no. But kelim allow for differentiation. We've talked about this so many times, just in terms of physical light. Right? Physical light, before it bounces off a kli, it's not clothed in the kli, it reflects off the kli, but physical light, before it bounces off a kli, you would assume that light is colorless. The light out here is colorless. Once it bounces off that, what do you realize? Oh, there's blue there. Oh, more blue. Is anything other than blue here? Everything's blue. Okay. Everything's blue. Look at blue shirts. Everything's blue. Okay. Maybe there's no other colors left. Okay. But if there were something red on the table, so you'd see an expression of red. If there was something yellow on the table, you'd see an expression of yellow. And if you saw something on the table that's somehow a combination of all of those, so you'd see that too. Okay. What does the Kli allow for? The Kli allows for the differentiated expression of the light, which in its essence is one. The light itself seems to be one, but once it encounters the Kli, so then the light expresses itself in all sorts of different ways. Okay, so too in reality. That's why we use the mashal for Kalim. Kalim for the Eibishter. Right? So what are Kalim? They're responsible for Metzius, existence. Right? Kalim hem bebechinas Metzius. Vayichud, vadevekus, therefore their unity, the unity of that state of reality with the Kadosh Baruch Hu, Eno yichud atzmi. It's not an essential unity. It's the unity of two separate things that come together. Now, in absolute terms, obviously they're one because Einod Milvade, there's nothing but the Eibishter. Okay, but we're talking about within the context of the existence of those things that are created down here in Olam Hazeh. Balochin, therefore, maybe a pasuk kasher yidbak ezor. Therefore, the pasuk brings the belt. Sha'ezer hu metzius la'atzmai, that the ezer is its own reality. Ela shedavuk la'adam, but it's connected to the person. It's not the person. The belt's the belt. And at the end of the day, he takes the belt out of his pants and hangs it up on a hook and waits for tomorrow's pants, and he'll put the belt back in those pants. Ubezayah, that's the medrash. So the medrash is talking about revealed reality. And on that level, that's mostly mitzvahs. That level, that's a connection, but not an absolute unity. Let's just finish this paragraph. What's or? Or is one. Or is beyond differentiation. Oh dear, there's no differentiation. It's just all the same. It's all one. Now, interesting enough, in that light, there are all sorts of different aspects that aren't revealed. Right? There's red photons and blue photons and yellow photons. And okay, we can't see them, but they're in there. Okay. They only come into a state of revelation when it reflects off a kli. So the light itself is a state of unity. Ubezar medaber binyan devekus the erdos. Devekus for yichud the erdos who yichud atzmi. It's an essential oneness, like Torah. V'lochin meivi akosev vatema dveikim b'avayalokechem. Devekus mamish. Mamish. Now, the Rebbe is using the word Dveikus because he's talking about two different states of Dveikus. So even in Dveikus itself, when you're talking about two separate things, there's a state where they're basically indistinguishable, even though they are two separate things, but they're indistinguishable one from the other, and a state where they're very clearly distinguished. That's mitzvahs and Torah. Dveikus mamish. V'yesh le'em et zeh shegam et dveikus da'eres nikra b'shem dveikus. So why is it called dveikus? Why isn't it called iskashus or isachtus? Which is said if they're really, really connected, so then that's called dveikus. That's called at the higher level hit kashrut or hit achdut, something else, not dveikus. Oh, so the Rebbe answers that, and we'll see that, and then we'll stop. Even that level of dveikus, where basically they seem to be indistinguishable one from the other, even though there are two separate things. Why? Rebbe says an amazing thing. The dveikus hu b'chitzonius, and dveikus we said was expressed in an external way. Hu mipnei shegama or, even the or, as powerful as that or is, and that or is an infinite expression of godly reality. Therefore, in infinity, I would expect things to be in a state of unity. Right? It's still what? Or who he's pashtus, it's still an expression of, pashtut is the expression outward, the gilui and revelation, shemichutz, that's outside of etzem, of the essence of God. So even or, and this is something we've learned a lot about, even or is only infinite. Therefore it's limited. Infinite reality is limited to the extent that it can't be finite. Etzem, the essence of the Kadosh Baruch Hu, is the source of infinite reality and the source of finite reality. It's the source of the or, it's the source of the kli. So there's a limitation to the connection of the or also. Which it's really interesting. I mean, we're not going to go further than Minor, but that has a lot to do with what anybody who learned of Rabbi Shimon, which we will probably learn in the next 2 months. So the only absolute connection to the Kadosh Baruch Hu is through Etzem, connecting to the essence of the Kadosh Baruch Hu. We saw that in terms of what Mesiras Nefesh is. It has to be connected to the Etzem. A little taste of this whole discussion. I mean, really just the whole discussion of Dveikus, and we didn't really get to these kashrus because the next level is all about these kashrus. You can have it, you can read it. If you have a problem, ask someone. We'll be back in a week. Okay, so tomorrow Mendel will be teaching for 5 days. I'll be back Bezrat Hashem Tuesday morning. We'll start a major project called Zois Kukas. It's a very, very special moment. Should have a wonderful time. Have an amazing Pesach Sheni. Have an amazing Lag Beimer, as they say in this country, Lag Sameach. And enjoy Meron.